Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Adi Granov panel. My name is Hung, and I will be your moderator today. We're going to do some housekeeping notes before we start. This panel will finish at 3:15 with the assistants here giving the 5-minute mark before we end it. I also notes no camping in the Palomino, but I think we should be fine here. So how this panel is going to work is we are going to open it up to questions for you guys. If you guys do have questions, just raise your hands, and our assistants Tristan and Lucas here will pass you on the mic. And
do we need a mic?
not really. Can you guys yell loud enough to like? Yeah. All right.
Oh, I see.
Okay. So you're being
Fine,
televised. Okay, so just gonna give a brief introduction to Adi here. You know him as a concept artist from Nintendo. That's how he started his career.
I
And
don't think many people know me from that.
yeah, I don't think anyone knows you from that. But he did, I guess the start of your comic career was through Necro War, through Dreamwave.
Yeah, Dreamwave, yeah.
Yeah, and since then he's worked with Warren Ellis in the relaunch of the Iron Man series, and pretty much made him a mainstay in the comic industry because of that. Since then, he's also gained recognition for his work as a concept illustrator for the Iron Man movies, including the most recent one, Iron Man 3, and the Avengers. Give a warm welcome to Adi Granov.
Hello. Hi, guys. Thanks for coming.
So, how's your time here so far?
Good, very good. Very busy.
Yeah.
I haven't left the table at all. This is the first time except for the restroom breaks. So, haven't seen much of the show or anything.
Now, living in Europe, do you do cons there as well?
Yeah, many cons. I mean, technically, you could do a con every week if you wanted to. I don't, but you could.
Yeah. How do they differ from like the North American ones, or even the Canadian versus American cons?
Some don't at all. There are some that they kind of do American style, like bigger cons, and then some, especially in countries like France and Spain, they're government funded, so they're more like festivals and they're free. So they're quite different because they usually go over like 5 days, and they're more like a open air festival type of thing. So yeah, there's different kinds, and there are some that are just like this, but not this big. Most cons, especially in England, I live in England, are, if you get 5,000 people, it's really big. So it's a completely different scale. But other than that,
Now, is it just because of the comic culture in Europe versus here in North
Well,
America?
it depends. I mean, in France, you do get 100,000 people. There are really big cons and massive cons. But in England, I'm not really sure. There are a lot of fans. There just doesn't seem to be that kind of culture of going to even though it's a very small country, people don't like going anywhere that is like farther away than 30 minutes. And I think if a con is, an hour away, they just don't want to go. So I think it's not a different comic culture, it's a different lifestyle culture, really.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, but when I'm at a con, to me, it's pretty much the same as anywhere else. I'm at a table and I draw and talk to people, and, it's not that much different.
How's your experience with the Calgarians like here?
I'm always.
Canadians?
I've been to Canada many times, but a lot of Canadians here, a lot of you guys laugh at me, but it's really true. Canadians really overall are much nicer than people in pretty much anywhere else I've been, and it's obviously maybe people themselves aren't nicer or not nicer, but as a cultural thing, it seems to be much more polite and pleasant. Because there are some countries you go to and if they're not happy with something, they get really angry. But here people are like, oh, okay, thank you, sorry, kind of thing, and it's really very pleasant.
You usually get those angry type of people at your panels or at your booths?
No, I mean, it's just usually if I do free sketches, that's in some countries, it always causes people to get angry. I don't understand it, but I guess because it's free, they all kind of like come and then they start fighting amongst themselves. And but that's some countries. I don't really want to name them, but some European countries, it's worse than others.
Yeah. Any questions from the crowd right now?
So as far as just the sense of fulfillment that you get when you get to put pen to paper or computer, when it comes to video games or comic books, where do you feel you get to exercise your abilities most, or stretch yourself in directions that you just really want to try something new or different?
Well, I think I'm perpetually unhappy with everything I do. I'm happy usually about halfway into it, and then I never reach that potential that I see in it. So it's difficult. It's kind of an exercise in frustration constantly, because I have this idea of where I want to go with it, and it doesn't really matter if it's computer or on paper or whatever. But it's kind of difficult to pinpoint fulfillment, because usually I'm just frustrated. But that's a good thing, because then it pushes me to try again and again and again, and it kind of like keeps rolling, because I always have this idea that the next one I have to make up for the last one, and I can see that they get better, but obviously my mindset is just slightly ahead of it, so I'm never as good as I kind of want to be, and so it's difficult. I mean, the fulfillment is obviously once I finish something and I send it off, and then the feedback comes in, oh, love it, we love it, excellent, thank you so much, kind of thing. Then I'm like, oh, okay, whew, I did a good job, kind of thing. But yeah, it's kind of it's a vague answer, but it's really kind of difficult to like, pinpoint.
Going through your bibliography, you're doing almost 4 issues a month, and on top of the movie stuff, where do you actually find the time to actually do all this stuff?
4 covers?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's all I do. I mean, it's not actually that much work. I mean, it is a lot of work, but it's not as much as like when I started working on the films, they would spend 2 weeks on an image, and coming from comics, I would spend 3 days per image, and they were just amazed, that. But I don't know. I mean, it's just you have to make money, you have to earn, so you have to keep moving, you have to, do stuff, and if it takes working 18 hours a day, sometimes that's what it takes. If it takes an all-nighter, that's what it takes, kind of thing. But being freelance, then I could take a week off just because I feel like it, kind of thing. So it's kind of give and take, and sometimes I have to work for 2 weeks straight without any rest, and I then go completely insane. But then after that, I can take a week off and just be kind of unemployed, really. So yeah, I don't know. Sorry, again, another vague, but it's one of those things. I don't have a set schedule because the work isn't regimented. So, if they ask me to do a cover and I say, yeah, great, and then another cover comes in and I'm like, oh, I really want to do that, and then I have to say, well, it means then the next 4 days I'll have to just work, with 4 hours of sleep. Yeah. But it's my choice. So, if I get a lot of cool projects lined up, then I sacrifice kind of the personal life to do them.
Well, that's a good life lessons for the future artists. You have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could maybe give us a breakdown of your workflow and thought process from the beginning to the end of a completed project.
I mean, I suppose it all starts with, hey, Adi, do you want to do this? And then I'm kind of like, some things are immediately like, yes, I want to do them. And it always starts with that kind of like, okay, how much work do I have? How much personal stuff do I have that week or 2 weeks scheduled? And then if I can do it, then, I have to kind of make space in my kind of loose schedule for whatever that is. And then it also is, like, let's say they want an X-Men cover, or so, and then the question is, well, how many characters do you want? If it's 1 character, then I can do it in a day. If it's 6 characters, then it'll take 4 or 5 days. So it always starts with that thought process. And then after that, I always ask, do you have anything in mind? And this goes for movies as well, it goes for video games. You know, sometimes they have nothing and they just say, hey, we want you to come up with something. Sometimes they have something quite specific, but I need to know that and I want to know that. So then they send whatever they have. And then I just do sketches. I do them digitally because I can move stuff around and, scale up and down and stuff. And if I have a really strong idea and I feel really confident, then I do just one. And if I'm kind of fishing, for whatever they might like or not like, then I do 4 or 5 sometimes, and then they choose. Sometimes the worst is when they start picking elements and putting them together. So anyway, after that they choose a sketch, and then I just go from there, and that's it. So then from that point to the finish, I just do what I do, and. Yeah, no, well, I think the picture forms, it's never, I don't really have a clear picture at the very beginning. It's usually in that middle part when it's like turning out really great. I'm like, oh yes. And then I kind of visualize this grand thing. And then that's where I kind of, at the end, especially if I like have to do like an all-nighter and it's the next like 2 p.m. the next day and I'm still working and I just finish it and I look at it, I'm like, oh, that's shit. And that's where the disappointment kind of sets in. But yeah, that's kind of the constant, flow. I mean, probably I should have some kind of a more regimented schedule, but my goal in life was always not to, so I really don't want to. Well, I mean, often I get an idea of something that I never have a set process. I have my kind of process that I follow, like technique or whatever, but I always kind of try to figure out something new and better, and then I kind of like 2 days into it, I'm like, what the hell did I do, and then. It's not always, but like once out of every 5 pieces I do, I get to that stage where I'm like, what the hell did I, why did I, what was I thinking, kind of thing. And then I have to fight my way back because I'm already so deep in with it. I mean, I just before coming here, I finished a cover for a magazine, and I started it 3 times. And I usually never do that because, time is money kind of thing. But I was just really not happy. So I did the first one, and I mean, I just drew it, and I started rendering it, and I was like, yeah, I hate this face. So I was like, oh, it's not too far into it, I'll start another one. And then that other one, I actually got quite far into it. And I was like, yeah, I don't want this to be on a magazine, advertising me. And I just kind of made the executive decision to, it's like, yeah, I'm 2 days into this, but I really have to scrap it. And I started another one. So, it's, I don't actually know where we started with this, but yeah. But anyway.
Have there been any projects that you would absolutely refuse to do?
Like in the past that I've done? Or,
Yeah.
I did a cover for Capcom, for Marvel vs. Capcom 3, which was hands down the worst project ever. It was horrible. And they destroyed the illustration completely. They took the illustration, took it apart, and took out so many elements of what made my work mine, and cranked up the saturation. I mean, it was 18 characters on a piece, and I had it all, composed like a movie poster. So some are larger, some are, smaller. So it all had like a flow and stuff. And they took it apart and made every single character exactly the same size. So you had 80, well, not all of them, but most of them. It's 18 characters all the same size, and it's just, I mean, it just looks like crap. And that's a project that I quit in the middle. But long story short, they kind of roped me into doing it, and I really, it was the worst thing I ever did.
Is there anything you can do to protect your propriety so they don't hand it over to them and then just change it all up?
Well, with a project like that, you can't, because you sign up, it's their project, and you're just, work for hire, and they pay you for the work that you do, but they own the image. And, I could have it written into contract that they can't mess with it, but then I'm limiting my, because a lot of these really big corporate companies, they really want to have the control. And then it's this balance, okay, is it worth doing? Or, it often comes down to money. So they, if they throw enough money at you, then it's like, well, fine, do whatever you want with it. I mean, but with that one, I did quit it in the middle, because I said, you guys want me to do something that I don't do. Yeah, that was a real nightmare. And I've signed a whole bunch of them yesterday. People kept bringing him over, and they're like, oh, I love it. I'm like, oh, God, fucking horrible. So, but yeah, anyway. I mean, I did another project for them that never came out because they ran out of money and scrapped it, and that was fantastic, and I loved it. So based on that, I was like, oh, great, they're a great company to work with. So, I accepted this other project, and then that just turned into an absolute nightmare.
Yeah. Are there any more questions right now? Oh.
Hi, Eddie. Just wondering, how old were you when you started drawing kind of seriously, and were you self-taught, or did you have formal training? And when did you realize, hey, I can make a living out of this sort of thing?
I mean, I've always drawn since I can remember, and I'm from Bosnia originally, and in former Yugoslavia, Bosnia was part of. The way the school system works is that after 8 years, then you have to choose a direction and go into like a trade school at 14. So I was quite good at drawing, and I wanted to go to art school because I was lazy. I didn't want to do anything else. And 2 years into that, I realized, hey, actually, I could make a career out of that. So I was about 16 when I realized actually that I could, that I should become serious about it. So yeah, that was 20 years ago. So yeah, it was exactly, I remember because I had a band, and I realized that I could either play music or draw, and I was much better at drawing than playing music. So I had to quit. Well, I didn't have to, but I decided consciously to just stop doing this other stuff and focus on, this one thing. And, it's served me well. I had kind of this idea in my head that if I keep drawing, everything will fall into place. And it somehow turned out to be exactly that, So I just kept drawing. But it was 16. I was 16 when I, decided. And to answer the other part is, no. So I went to that art school for 4 years, and then I went to an art institute, which is I don't know if you guys know here, but in the States, like a cookie cutter type of art school. So I went there for 2 years because I used to live in Seattle. No, it's the Art Institute, and it's like a art school that gives you a degree, even though you might suck completely. And so.
And what was your first job? Did you get it when you were 17?
Well, my first job, art job, I got when I was about 17, and I was living in Croatia at the time, and I got hired to illustrate a teenage magazine. So they had I illustrated 2 different stories. So they were like spot illustrations for these written stories, and one was a horror story, and the other one was a romantic story. So I would do 2 illustrations in each issue, and that was the first paid proper job. And then after that, when I moved to the States, I went to college, and then the full proper job after that I got on my graduation day was at Nintendo as a concept artist, because a vice president of this branch of Nintendo came to the portfolio show and hired me to right there on the spot. So.
Were you living in Seattle at that time?
Yeah, I lived in Seattle for about 6 years.
Because Nintendo was based, or is based?
Yeah, right outside of Seattle in Redmond, actually where Microsoft is.
Being Bosnian, was your career choice a worry for your parents when you told them you were going to be an artist?
No, not really. I mean, my mom was really supportive, so yeah, I don't know, maybe privately they did think oh God, what the hell? But no, my dad wasn't really involved, but my mom was very supportive. So I think only when we were living in the States in the beginning, and you know, it was really tough. We were refugees because we left because of the war. And I think she was kind of hoping I was going to get a, you know, proper job kind of thing. But now, you know, she works at the Chicago Tribune, and she manages some accounts. And there's a guy in Seattle, I guess, who's getting something through, like he works Chicago Tribune, and he was getting something from my mom. And he saw her last name, and he said, "Oh, you know, are you by any chance related to Adi Granov?" And she's like, "Oh, that's my son." And he's like, "Oh, I'm a big fan." And my mom, you know, her heart is like this big, you know. So you know, it turned out okay.
Are there any questions from the audience right now? Oh, we'll go with you first.
I think you need to do it in the microphone because they're doing a.
Thanks very much. Adi, I was just wondering what your thought process was when you're working on material like Iron Man and you know that somebody's going to actually take your illustration and make something of it, so it's actually going to go to physical production. What kinds of things do you have to have in mind when you're doing those illustrations that maybe you wouldn't be constrained by when you're doing sort of regular comic book art or illustration art?
I was never really concerned with it, and I think that was kind of like, you know, ignorance is bliss. And because I didn't come from like the movie world or anything like that, so when I got hired to work on the like the first Iron Man, I just did what I always do. It's just because we had, you know, the budget and the time to design the best Iron Man we could, then instead of like in comics where you are not paid for the design, you're paid to just do pages, so you have to kind of do it as quickly as you can. On the film, I was being paid to do the design, so I just did the best that I can, and I was teamed up with a guy called Phil Saunders, who's more of a technical designer, like automotive and industrial type of stuff. So I would do kind of the aesthetic part, and then he would do some kind of mechanical elements, and then I would take his elements and incorporate them back into my kind of overall design. And so I was never really, I just kind of did what I thought should be done, but I never had any guidance as to, you know, like what to be concerned with or whatever. It just, I think because of the way I think, it really lended itself well to the 3D world, you know, in a movie kind of thing. And I, you know, made a lot of assumptions, but they turned out to be pretty good. So in the end, you know, it worked out pretty well. But I think having worked with a lot of movie designers, or, you know, guys who work on movies, I think they're actually really kind of held back by this, like, oh, we need to consider this, we need to consider that, and then you end up with everything that kind of looks the same. And I kind of came from like, you know, just completely like, oh, you know, I don't know anything about anything, I'll just do this, and so I think that's what really helped me, because it kind of like infused this different, like, approach to it. And I'm kind of the same now. I really don't, you know, I consider things, but I don't really like regiment myself or whatever with it. And whenever I do, it turns out really bad and nobody likes it anyway, so.
You had a question?
Yeah, I was curious if you had any personal projects that you're currently, you know, moving forward on, or if not, what would be your dream project just for you personally?
Yes. I want to do, well, I am kind of in the process of creating like a creator-owned property that, you know, will be a graphic novel. And a friend of mine who he's a guitar player in a really big rock band. He's gonna write it so he can finance it, so we don't actually need outside help until it's finished. So that's pretty much like the dream situation. And it's just, we need time, because he's on tour and I'm just kind of keeping up with, you know, doing the work I have to do. So the dream project is there, we just need time to actually, you know, I'll probably need a year to dedicate to it, and yeah, we'll see. But that's kind of, so basically, I mean, it's doing a comic, because right now, like, doing stuff through Marvel is not economical for me to do pages because it takes me so long. But doing a page takes me twice as long as doing a cover, but it pays less, and the original art is worth a tenth of what a cover is worth. So it's economically really difficult for me to do a comic full-time because it would mean a real sacrifice in my private life. And that's why, I do like the short stories here and there just because I love doing the comics. It's just that financially it doesn't make any sense to me. So, but with a creator-owned thing, then at least, I can make the sacrifice if I need to, but at least in the end, I own the thing, and I can, even if it never makes any money, at least it's mine. But, if I spend 2 years of my life doing a Spider-Man comic, it's just a Spider-Man comic, it might be hugely successful, but it doesn't belong to me, and I'm just another one in a line of hundreds of artists who have worked on Spider-Man. Nothing against Spider-Man, but what I mean is economically it doesn't make much sense for me.
With the advent of Kickstarter and pretty much independents being able to release their stuff online, are you planning to go to the online route to release your comics, or will you be falling back on the paper route?
Well, because of this independent backing, we can kind of do whatever he feels like affording, kind of thing, Kickstarter, I think, is fantastic, if because it allows people who don't have the backing to create backing, and actually put out independent stuff, and it's definitely something I would consider doing if I didn't have this other kind of scenario set up. And I have considered it actually, because I thought about releasing an art book, but the problem is most of my work is Marvel. So either Marvel releases an art book, or I have to create so much material to release my own art book. So I haven't really looked far into stuff like Kickstarter just because I don't have that kind of work at the moment.
What do you think the future for comic books is going to look like? Will we still have paper?
I hope so, because I like it, but I don't know. I really don't know, because I think the new generation of readers, if there are new generation, I don't know how many young people are picking up comics. I really don't know the statistics or anything, and I think they don't have that kind of emotional thing growing up with the paper stuff, with the books, and I think stuff like Kindle or whatever, it will become so, and more advanced things that are coming will probably replace paper completely, and maybe paper will become like LPs now, because people still buy vinyl records because it's this cool thing, or they like the sound or whatever, and I think it might become something like that, so like a niche product. It's just that at the moment, people like me and older people and who have grown up with comics, I think they just like that kind of tactile, whatever you say, feel of comics. Because I can't really, lay in bed with like a tablet. I need comic.
Yeah, definitely. Is there any questions from the crowd right now? Oh, yes.
So before you started working in comics, were you a fan of comic books and maybe growing up in Bosnia? Was it hard to get comic books and that sort of thing?
No, actually, in Yugoslavia at the time, comic book culture was huge. I mean, really, it was a very, very popular form of entertainment, and but it was mostly European comics, so French and Italian comics, and we did get some American stuff, because I remember reading Spider-Man and Silver Surfer. Silver Surfer was very popular, but it was mostly European stuff. But it was really, really a big part of the culture. So I grew up with comics and I loved them, and it was my favorite thing as a kid. That's where actually quite a few ex-Yugoslavians, so like Croatian, especially artists in comics, because they grew up also, it's part of the culture. So one of my best friends, Esad Ribic, the painter who does a lot of Marvel stuff, he's Croatian, and we often kind of get together and kind of reminisce of the old days and reading comics and growing up on filthy comics from France that, you know, we as kids, they were just sold regularly, you know, but they were, you know, I look at them now, I'm like, holy shit, you know, I read this at like 9 years old, you know, like Milo Manara type of stuff, and, but yeah, anyway, yeah, it was a big part of my childhood.
Do you have a favorite character or title?
No, I always followed artists more than anything else. So, you know, whatever they did. I mean, my favorite artist was the French artist Jean-Jérôme Aubius, who just died last year. I, you know, worship him to this day. He's just kind of a, you know, beyond just a comic book artist. But yeah, to this day, I don't really follow, like people ask me what my favorite characters are, and really, I don't care. I care the creative teams, you know, so if they take Spider-Man, I'll love that Spider-Man, but it doesn't mean that I'll keep loving Spider-Man forever. If somebody crappy comes in to write it or draw it, it's like I don't care anymore kind of thing. So I follow artists and writers more than I follow characters.
Is your artwork right now reflective of what's been done, what you read in Europe?
I suppose so, yeah. I mean, I think my biggest influences were like the French comic book artists and then the American movie poster artists like Drew Struzan and Amsel. So you can really see those two things coming together in my art. I think, at least, you know, that's what I kind of attempt to do. So yeah, I mean, I was never really influenced by American comic book artists because I didn't read any, you know, so like a lot of people, you know, hugely influenced by, you know, Kirby or Romito or whatever, and I just didn't have really that stuff. Either you know, I wasn't that into it when I was a kid because the French and the Italian stuff was more exciting to me or whatever, but, you know, it just that kind of, like, it's only now that I look at it, I'm like, oh wow, you know, how come I didn't, like, pay attention to this before, especially some of the Kirby stuff, you know, now I find it quite mind-blowing, but back then, I just don't even remember ever coming across it.
Any other questions? Oh, yes.
Hi. So just as a illustrator, I'm just kind of curious if a customer asked you or a client asked you if you could push the boundaries of this design, let's say, what would that mean to you? Like graphically push the boundaries of this?
It usually means that they actually don't want you to push them as far as they seem to think they want. Well, it would entail doing it really, you know, doing something new, doing something, you know, exciting, doing something, you know, kind of not cookie cutter. You know, the problem is, like, especially like Hollywood stuff. In Hollywood, in the Illustrators Union, there are 150 guys, that's it, and only about half of them are working. So all of the films made in Hollywood within the union are designed by about 75 guys. So everything, that's why every freaking thing looks the same. And it might be great, but, you know, 20 films, you know, every kind of spaceship looks similar. It looks like the same company made them. So to me, it means not that, you know. So if somebody asks, like, oh, you know, we want your take on it, that's not my take, you know. It's just that often when you're asked, actually what they mean is maybe just moving that line a bit, and that's pushing the envelope. But to me, you know, because I don't even remember now if it was Iron Man 2 or 3, and they actually said, oh, we want something, you know, exciting, something completely different, you know, and I did something, you know, it was still Iron Man, but it was really kind of really pushing it, and they're like, holy shit, what the hell is this, you know, this is not what we wanted. And then as you can tell in the movies, basically it's just a variation on a theme, and it's because, you know, changing the overall color to gold rather than red and gold is actually pushing the envelope to them. But to me, that's not it, really. To me, that's just giving it a repaint. So I don't know how to, you know, without a specific example, I don't really know how to really specifically answer.
So like in any of the Iron Man movies, did you put, is there something in the film that we can physically see that you would say, or even in the Avengers, I stretched this in a way that would be unorthodox?
I mean, I think probably the most kind of unusual thing that isn't unusual now just because it's been around for so many years, but I think Monger in the first film was just completely, they were doing these very Hollywood kind of designs that looked kind of like it could be out of any science fiction film. And Jon Favreau just said, hey, could you do a take on this? And I did these kind of hockey player from Mars type of images, just all kind of hammered steel type of thing. And it was completely just out of, because I like old cars, I like working on old cars, and I had this image of an old a Ferrari being restored, so it was completely beat up and stripped of paint, and it had this, kind of like a hole. It looked like a hole, with like just, beat up, and I was like, that's kind of what it should look like. And, then the exposed pistons and the giant, gears and stuff like that, and it looked completely different from what they were going with. And John looked at it and said, oh, fuck yeah, let's do this. So, and then, Ryan Meinerding, who's well, now he's one of the supervisors at Marvel Studios, but at the time he was just one of the concept artists. He and I then did Monger together, but it really was kind of I don't know if it was really like pushing the envelope, but it was not part of like a process. It was just kind of, came out of me kind of liking this hammered steel look. It's all right.
No, go ahead.
So is there any, the first thing that comes to my mind would be something like District 9, where I felt that was pushing the design element.
I agree, yep. But that's because it's not a Hollywood film. You can really tell that it's not a Hollywood film. You can tell that it's not part of the Hollywood machine. You can tell it was designed by people who don't really work within Hollywood. And yeah, I love that film. I love everything about it.
I was going to ask you, what other films would you say would be stimulating to?
Well, the perfect example of a kind of outside the box is, I mean, now it's so much part of pop culture, but at the time it was a really brave thing, was Blade Runner. Because the art team that did Blade Runner was actually a French assembled art team for a Dune project that Alejandro Jodorowsky in France was doing parallel with the David Lynch one. And in the end, they went with the David Lynch project, but this art team of Mobius, who I mentioned earlier, and H.R. Giger and Chris Foss, who did the spaceship designs, and Sid Mead, the industrial designer out of San Francisco, they were brought together for Blade Runner, and they did it in England, completely outside of this typical kind of movie world that was being done in Hollywood. I don't have anything against Hollywood. It's just that it's a machine, and they just kind of like, they don't think who's going to be best for the job. It's like who's available just to fill the position. While like Blade Runner, they hired these guys because they were amazing, and they sorry, actually, I'm completely. It's not Blade Runner. It's Alien, and then the same guys then did Blade Runner. Well, a lot of the same guys, but it's Alien that I'm talking about. Sorry. And in Alien, of course, H.R. Giger. They did Alien, and it looks like nothing, nothing else on Earth. Like the alien creature, the those spacesuits that Mobius designed that look like samurai suits in space, and stuff like that. You would never see that in a Hollywood movie at the time, and that's kind of the perfect example. It's just that since then, most even like films made in another one would be Fifth Element. And again, Mobius was involved with Fifth Element. And it's also because it's completely like a left field, and it came from, a team that isn't this kind of like cookie cutter type of stuff. Because when you look at films like Battleship, or, or Stealth, if you remember Stealth, or, it's all the same guys designing them. They're great designers, and there, but it all looks exactly the same. While Fifth Element looked, they got Jean-Paul Gaultier to do this costume designs. It's amazing, it's beautiful. So anyway, that's the kind of stuff I'd like to do, but, you know.
Okay, we're at the 5-minute mark. If there's any more questions, please raise them now. Okay, yes, sir.
Thanks. Probably loud enough without this, but thanks. Adi, I'd just like to know who among your contemporaries working in comics now do you admire the most? Whose art do you really look forward to seeing come out, and who's being innovative these days?
There are a whole bunch of guys working today, actually. This Croatian guy I just mentioned, Esad Ribic, he's amazing. Adam Hughes is incredible. Lee Bermeo, he's American, but he lives in Italy. He's great. Travis Charest, or Charest, depending on how you, but he doesn't produce almost anything at all. But when he does, he's mind-blowing. Always been a huge fan of Simon Bisley, who's here. I'm trying to think. I mean, there are a lot of guys. Gene Ha is one of my favorite artists. I really love his art. Lionel Yu. Yeah, I mean, there seem to be a lot of really good artists working. I often think that they're not given projects that really, like, they deserve, but a lot of the guys working in the industry are really, really good at the moment. But yeah.
Even now, are you drawing from these current artists that are coming out?
Oh yeah, I mean,
inspiration?
always. We always, look at each other's work, and it's like, oh shit, I wish I did that kind of thing. And I mean, it's always the same. I go up to someone whose work I really like, and I'm like, oh man, he's so much better than me. And then you can tell someone else comes over and they're looking at the portfolio, and you can tell that same look in their eye, kind of thing. And it's, it's just it kind of goes, and it's a really good thing because it means I want to be better. Because once you kind of feel that, like, oh, I'm the king of the hill, that's when you stagnate, and 20 years later you're doing the same old shit. And that's not what I want happen to me. I want to always be unhappy with what I do and trying to improve and looking at other people's work and finding new stuff to inspire me and push me.
Yeah. If there's any more questions, yes, we'll take the last one.
You mentioned a few artists attending this convention that you admire. Have you had a chance to talk with any of them?
Most of them, yeah. I mean, we usually, because we do these cons so often, we all, well, most of us know each other quite well. So Adam and his wife Alison, we had dinner last night and the night before, and it's really nice to catch up. And they came to a con in England where we live, and we spent some time with them. So it's always kind of nice to meet your favorite artists and realize they're really nice people, and then you become friends with them, and you don't see them like for months or sometimes even a year, but because that time kind of passes in between, it's almost like you get to know them better, even though you don't really. But then next time you see them, you're so happy to see them, and so yeah. I mean, a lot of artists that I've mentioned, I know quite well, and I'm good friends with. And it's fantastic because they're people that I would be a huge fan of if I was, even if I wasn't in the industry. So, it's still, like one of my favorite artists is Jeff Darrow. And recently we became, friends, and he's going to come to England at the end of the year and stuff. And to me, that's holy shit, it's Jeff Darrow. And so, yeah, it's exciting and it's great.
We're just about out of time. You can see Adi. Where are you? X17?
X17, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you can see Adi if you want to talk to him.
I think I've seen most of these guys
Yeah.
there anyway.
But thank you, Adi, for coming.
No
If you want to
problem.
give him a hand. And thank you very much. All right. So we'll wrap things up. Enjoy the rest of the show, guys.